On today's show, an emergency podcast on a Monday afternoon as the Hawks add two pretty big hires to the front office and add some, I would say, clarity to the situation in the front office. We'll get into what it means, what it says, who's coming in, and more coming up.
You are Locked On Hawks, your daily Atlanta Hawks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 1992 of the Locked On Hawks podcast. I am your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you on a Monday afternoon. It's June 9th, and today's podcast is brought to you by the folks at Monarch Money. Take control of your finances right now with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for half off your first year. I also want to encourage you at the top of the show, as I always do on the podcast, to make it your first listen each and every day. Just search Locked On Hawks anywhere you find your podcast. Click this place to listen to this podcast right now, whether it be Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. We are all over the place when it comes to podcasts, and please tell your friends and subscribe to the show. We really appreciate your support and your patronage. And it's been busy on the podcast, but in one respect, it's been pretty quiet. So I should say at the top of the show, I did an episode literally, 13 hours ago, late Sunday night, and that's a relevant discussion still. It has to do with Trae Young and optimism, some quotes over there, and a visit from Glenn Willis to talk about Garrison Matthews in our typical player capsule style. But in the late morning hours of Monday, there was some clarity and some reporting done on the Hawks front office search. That is certainly the biggest development in quite some time. So if you might remember this, dating back to April 21st, the Hawks have been kind of in limbo. They fired Landry Fields on April 21st. It's now June 9th. It's been 6-7 weeks as they had this search going for a president of basketball operations. And really, just in general, it's been kind of quiet. There's been reporting on who they were interviewing, all those things, but kind of at least especially in the last couple of weeks, pretty quiet on this front. Now, Shams Charania reports on Monday morning that the Hawks are going to be hiring Pelicans executive Bryson Graham as Senior Vice President of Basketball Operations and 76ers executive Pierre Dinwiddie as Senior Vice President of Strategy and Analytics. So these are not officially announced as I record this on Monday afternoon. Keep that in mind. But I can confirm, I would say I have triple confirmation now. These are happening. These hires are happening. They've not been announced, but Shams reports, I confirm they're out there. And again, Shams had it first. I can also confirm that Graham and Dinwiddie are both going to be working under Hawks General Manager Onsi Saleh. That's an important distinction. When this was kind of just first tweeted out by Shams, people were kind of like, all right, what's going on here? Are they hiring someone above Onsi? No, I can, again, confirm that Graham and Dinwiddie are both working under Onsi Saleh on the organizational chart. So as of right now, the number one person on the basketball operations organizational chart for the Hawks is Onsi Saleh, who, if you missed it, back on April 21st, was hired as the permanent general manager. And not to do the whole spiel again, some organizations, including the Hawks, go back and forth on this. Sometimes the GM is the number one person in the organization. So sometimes they're number two person in the organization. If they have a president of basketball operations, Travis Schlenk was both. He was the GM as the number one and then was promoted as the number one still to president. Landry Fields was the GM as number one, was never promoted to the top spot and as far as the theoretical top spot. But in the meantime, the person running basketball operations has been Onsi Saleh for the last 6 weeks, and he is still currently number one on the call sheet for the Hawks. Now, I will also say this. There's been discussion about what was going to happen here, whether this kind of ends the search for the Hawks, etc. So lots of things to get to. And then, by the way, at the end of the podcast, I'll get into kind of what more of these guys, Bryson Graham and Pierre Dinwiddie, are going to be adding to the Hawks organization. But in the meantime, Shams included a reference at the end of his piece that he wrote on ESPN about this, that, quote, any potential president hire for the Hawks will be made to complement Saleh and his staff, end quote. So that does not shut the door on a search for a president of basketball operations, or a POBO, as I've been shortening it to, that could be hired above Onsi. Also, Lauren Williams, good friend of the podcast of the AJC, reported from his source that the search has not yet concluded for a president. I have, for the record, never said that they've stopped searching for a president at any point. And I'll say that again now. They've left the door open. That seems purposeful to me that they're leaving the door open. Now, what I will say quickly here is that I will now be quite surprised if the Hawks hire a president of basketball operations. One more time. I'll be surprised. I'm not saying that they definitely will not at all, but I will be surprised if the Hawks make a hire above Onsi this summer. That's where I am at this point in time. Now, if you missed any of this in the past, or if you're a new listener, first of all, welcome aboard. Second of all, the first day that this was all out there, a Tony Wrestler put out a pretty aggressive quote and proclamation press release about how they were going to be searching for a high-level, experienced executive to hire as president of basketball operations. They didn't have to do that, but Tony did it, which was a little bit interesting to me. Again, didn't have to do that. But I said on that first episode, the emergency podcast from that day, that I had heard that Onsi Saleh, I said Saleh at that point in time, Onsi Saleh now, as I know how to say his name better, Onsi Saleh would be the number one guy potentially at the end. Like there was a scenario in which Onsi was not the president, but was still the number one person by the end of the process. Throughout this process, that's been kind of in the background. Last week, I said that I thought it was the most likely outcome. So for the first time, I went from like possible to likely in my reporting and my estimated, intel a week ago. Now I have moved to, again, flat out expecting Onsi to be the number one person. Again, I am not reporting that it is 100% going to be Onsi as the number one person. Maybe the Hawks have a card up their sleeve that no one I have talked to or speculated with or talked to around the league is thinking of. Maybe they have a home run hire that they just can't make yet. That's all possible. Maybe Tim Conley, who's going to be a free agent if he wants to be. He has an option in Minnesota. If he opted out, I'm sure the Hawks would make a call to Tim Conley. My Riem situation has always been, and is even firmer now, that the Hawks maybe had a guy, two, maybe three, that they were kind of dreaming on and hoping to get. And once they couldn't get those people, or at least they hadn't gotten those people, the chances of Onsi being the number one person increased because, look, Onsi Saleh is very qualified, very smart, very well respected. He's well compensated. All of those things. It's a very reasonable choice to be the number one person in the organization. I've seen, or I always hear people that don't know him. That's what it is. If you're most of the time executives in the NBA, if they have not been a number one, fans and regular people do not know them. And that, by the way, you shouldn't need to know them. They're just in the background. Onsi is one of those people that you wouldn't know. He's never been like interviewed or talked on the record or been the number one person. So I get the skepticism. I really do. But from what I can glean, what I've talked to, heard, etc., very smart guy, very qualified guy, very respected guy. But let's say all that to say, I'll be surprised now if he is not number one on the call sheet heading into next season. Now, of course, number one on the call sheet does not take into account that Tony Wrestler is active as an owner. It does not take into account that Nick Wrestler, Tony's son, is still in the mix. Those things are all out there, so that's almost separate. It's not separate, never can be, but it's almost separate. But if you look at the basketball operation structure, Onsi's number one on the list right now. And if you were going to go with Onsi, if you were going to do that, these are the kind of moves that you would do, in my opinion. You would bring in two very experienced front office executives with high-level acumen. They've seen a lot of things. They have different strengths, all of that. I'll discuss both guys more in a minute, but both have great reputations that I've heard more and more about in the last couple hours since this news broke this morning in the midst of me throwing on a t-shirt and trying to record on my lunch hour on a Monday. But really, really strong reputations in the league that I've heard about both these people. I've never met either of them to my knowledge. I've heard positive things before this, so it's not like just blowing smoke now, but reaching out to people that know these people, that have covered these people, talk to them. Pretty much a universal approval rating for these executives. Does that mean they're perfect hires? We don't know that right now, but that's just what we can know at the outset. So I think it makes total sense to bring in some fresh views and some experience to complement Onsi Saleh. But you're also empowering him as the number one person in this scenario. If he's the guy, you want to have him have people that are experienced under him because he is a first-time executive. And even if he wasn't, even if he was the guy they hired in the first place from the outside or whatever, if you're hiring a first-time GM or POBO or whatever it's going to be, you would want them to have their number two, number three, somebody in the organization that's done this before, or at least have experience in a lot of different ways. And again, you can make the pessimistic point about Tony and Nick. That puts a damper on things. I get all that. I promise you I do. But you now have a guy that I believe is very qualified to be number one. If you want to have him do that in Onsi, you have a guy in Bryson Graham who is basically doing the same number two job that he had with the Pelicans, as we'll get into more in a second. You have a guy up here, Dinwiddie, who's been working at a high level for offices for well over a decade. He was a key figure in Indiana, a key figure in Philadelphia, etc. And then you also have Kyle Korver, who's still there, assistant GM, and a guy who's in player development. Kyle's a smart guy. people below them that you would never think about, people, whether it's in the cap side of things or in the scouting side of things, development side of things, people that are down the organizational chart that are valuable people. The Hawks have a coherent and I think pretty solid front office structure right now without doing anything else. They have a qualified number 1, a qualified number 2, a qualified 3 and 4. Like, you're in good shape there, I believe. So we'll see. But at the moment, to kind of summarize this, they've made 2 interesting hires, experienced people, high-level people that are qualified. I believe, I project, I'm not guaranteeing, but I project that this is all they're going to do as far as high level is concerned, and it's going to be Onsi in the top spot. And we'll see if it's not. Maybe it'll be a curveball, but that's kind of the high level, my reaction, my analysis to what's happened so far with this. In a moment, I will also get to some breakdowns of the strengths and histories of Graham and Dinwiddie as they're prominent figures in this organization. We'll get into all of that and more in just one moment. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. I've done this in the past, I'm sure, but at times I've looked in my bank account, to be honest with you, and wonder where all of my money happened to go between dining out and online shopping and entertainment. It's easy to lose track sometimes, and that's where Monarch Money comes in. Monarch Money is your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control of your finances. And Monarch Money is not just a budgeting app, it's instead a complete financial command center. You can track your accounts, your investments, and your spending all in one place. You can stop just managing your money and start building wealth instead. I started using Monarch. I also spent money on spending on food. That's just one example, but now I budget smarter and save more money in the process. Instead of juggling multiple apps at the same time, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals all in one place. Also, if you want to, manage money in conjunction with your partner. If you want to do that, it's smoother than ever. You can track personal accounts and shared accounts, set goals, stay on the same page without any of the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money and use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com. The code is LOCKEDONNBA for half off your first year. Today's show is brought to you by DoorDash. And NBA fans, you know what time it is. Playoff season means big performances and even bigger rewards. And DoorDash is bringing the heat with a slam dunk deal for DashPass members during the 2025 NBA playoffs. It's called They Swoosh, and you score. If a player has 50 points or more in a playoff game, if you're a DashPass member, you can score a free 3-piece crispy sandwich combo from Wingstop the very next day. Place an order of $20 or more. Use the code Wingstop50 at checkout, and the combo is yours. Crispy, delicious, and totally free. Offer valid noon to midnight the day after the game. Terms apply. If you've ever looked at food delivery in the past, thought there just has to be a better way to do it, you check out DoorDash instead. With DashPass, if $0 delivery fees, an exclusive purchase like this one, just imagine how much you could save over a full basketball season. And here's the play. Sign up for DashPass to unlock this and more exclusive deals all season long. And when any player has 50 points or more in a playoff game, if you're a member at DashPass, you can grab a free 3-piece crispy tenders combo from Wingstop the very next day with a $20 plus order and code Wingstop50. That's DashPass, your door to more savings, more flavor, and more ways to win. Terms apply. All right, so we've discussed what actually happened on Monday and the hires and who they are and the structure of the organization, but a little bit more on who the Hawks are getting. So, for one, we'll start with Graham. He's the bigger name as far as the title is concerned. Bryson Graham coming from the Pelicans as the senior VP of basketball operations. And Bryson Graham was the general manager of the Pelicans when he was hired. Now, again, not to give the whole thing again, he was not the number one person with the Pelicans. The Pelicans have undergone an entire overhaul here. So the Pelicans fired their number one person a couple of weeks ago in David Griffin. He was the president of basketball operations or whatever his title was with the Pelicans. He was the number one guy. Graham was the number two under him. So he's moving from that to being kind of the number two in Atlanta as well, at least as of current construction. Obviously, the Pelicans have actually loaded up. They've gone with Joe Dumars and Troy Weaver. So he would have been going back as the number three, it seems like, in New Orleans. Keep that in mind. That's a notable data point. But he was working under David Griffin in a similar role to what we'll have in Atlanta, it seems like. He has an awesome story, does Graham. He began with an intern. Sorry, he was an intern with the Pelicans. That was his starting point. And then he progressed to the video room as video coordinator, up the chain to being the GM about a year ago after more than a decade in the organization. An awesome story. And he is a very well-respected scout and talent evaluator. That's his strength, it seems like. Again, I don't know the man personally. That's what I've heard. He's been credited quite a bit, both online and offline in the last few hours, almost by everyone that I've talked to or heard from, for being kind of their draft guru in New Orleans the last couple of years. Not to overstate that or whatever. It's still the person at the top of the sheet making the picks. But Graham has been their kind of lead talent evaluator, scout, and draft person. And the Pelicans, for all of their faults as an organization, and they have many, I would say, they've done a pretty interestingly bad job at times. They've done quite well in the draft, which is actually what you want to see if you're hiring someone in that kind of scouty role. For example, they drafted Trey Murphy lower than he should have gone. He should have gone higher. Herb Jones in the second round, grand slam pick. Yves Missi this year in the 20s looks like a really good pick. They didn't draft Jose Alvarado or Najee Marshall, but they were both undrafted, quick signs by the Pelicans that ended up being good rotation players out of nowhere. That's good scouting, good development. He's in charge of that. And of course, the elephant in the room, they drafted Dyson Daniels with the Pelicans. Now they traded him. I don't think that was Bryson Graham's choice, but they have a lot of good hits in the draft in the last few years. Now, again, I'm not trying to tell you that the only person responsible for that is Bryson Graham, but I've heard, again, it's been publicly out there. I think my guy at Locked On Pelicans, Jake Madison, reported this today, like that he was their draft guy. Basically, it's a loss to the Pelicans because he was kind of that guy. So I like the hire, respected GM. Again, not number one person, but like real executive, scout background, talent evaluation background, and a good mixture with Onsi and with Pierre Dinwiddie. So Dinwiddie comes from is going to be the senior VP of strategy and analytics. So look, it's always a little bit funny with front office listings and job titles, but it's notable to me that both of these guys, Graham and Dinwiddie, are being hired as senior vice presidents and seemingly on the same plane. You got Graham on basketball operations and Dinwiddie on strategy and analytics. Interesting to me. So they're kind of like 2A, 2B, it seems like, right now under Onsi with their listings. Anyway, Dinwiddie was the executive VP of basketball operations for the Sixers, a similar title, working under Daryl Morey in Philly and alongside old pal Elton Brand. Obviously, people know him very well. He has a sterling reputation in the league. Heard the name before, don't know him well again, but a source told me that Dinwiddie is, quote, as good of a dude as there is in the league, end quote. He also has a well-rounded history of different jobs and different titles or whatever. He was with the Pacers organization for more than a decade. I had a Pacers source tell me that Dinwiddie is, quote, sharp as hell, end quote. And another person who would know him very well saying, quote, he'll be extremely valuable to Onsi and that whole crew in Atlanta, end quote. So, like, again, not a perfect science. I'm trying to tell people that I know in the league that have covered these people before, and people that won't lie to me, crucially. I know who will lie to me, who won't. I pass that along to you. I trust these people that I'm talking to. And look, if anything, Dinwiddie might be overqualified for the role he's getting in Atlanta. But as I said before, the Hawks have an earned reputation for being willing to spend money on front office talent. Now, I've picked on Tony Ressler for plenty of things, and I probably will in the past. For luxury tax avoidance and roster building stuff, for being too involved in basketball operations, for letting Nick Ressler be too involved in basketball operations. All those I believe to be fair critiques of Tony Ressler. He has spent money off the court regularly, whether when it comes to building the basketball, building the practice facility in Brookhaven, which is an awesome facility, spending on that, spending on the G League team, and then also spending on executive talent. He paid Travis Schlenk very well. He paid Landry Fields well. He paid to get Onsi Saleh from Golden State. I've heard that Graham and Dinwiddie will be well compensated for their new roles. So, again, plenty to knock him for, but that's one area where the Hawks do not seem to skimp on money is spending for executives. So that's maybe how you get these guys that are kind of making lateral moves here, honestly, especially Dinwiddie. Graham, you could say, all right, there was an overhaul in New Orleans. He might have taken a little bit of a smaller job in New Orleans, but Dinwiddie is not having that issue. He's kind of taking a lateral jump to Atlanta. So all that said, I will learn more about these gentlemen in the future. I'll talk to them, learn their stuff. And look, if we're being honest, once these guys are hired, fans don't really think a ton about the number 2, 3, 4 executives in front offices. It's going to be Onsi, who's under the gun. If he's the number 1 person, if the hire above him, it'll be that person. It was, I would say 95% of the time, if someone was mad about the Hawks in the last couple of years, you would hear blah, 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 Landry Fields. Or blah, 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 Tony Ressler. It wasn't like they were saying, wow, what is Kyle Korver doing? That's not what happens. Kyle's obviously a more famous example because he was a Hawks player, so he gets more prominently involved. But after today, or after this week, I don't think you're probably going to hear a ton about Bryson Graham, Peter Dinwiddie from Hawks fans. That's fine. That's how it's supposed to work. But in the meantime, I like these hires from what I can glean. I think it makes sense to go with this route that they're seemingly going down. I think Onsi is a better option at number one than all of the, I would say, available people that they definitely could have hired. Again, it might be somebody that I'm not thinking of, but all the people that were like closely linked to the job that were not, big splashes like Masai or whatever. I'd rather just go with Onsi. I think he's a smart guy. And then filling out the front office below him with talented people, experienced people, that's what I would be trying to do. And the Hawks seemingly have done that. So will it work? We'll see. Will they hire somebody else? We'll see. But my prediction is they won't, and it'll be Onsi. And the first, look, we're almost there. The first time that this front office, as it is structured right now, will be making a decision, at least they have to make a decision, is in about 16 days. The draft's in 16 days. So we're getting there. I don't know if they're going to talk before this. Someone asked me today if they were going to do an intro press conference. I doubt it. With a non-number one hire in the front office, I would be surprised if these guys talked on the record at any point, really, in press conference setting. Onsi hasn't even talked at this point in time. When they hired Onsi to a similar role a year ago, he never talked to the media. That's not abnormal at all. But at some point, you're going to have to hear from somebody in the front office. Maybe it's on the draft or whatever, but stay tuned. I'll have more on this, I'm sure, as more comes out. Again, it's Monday, midday right now. This is my emergency reaction. I'll have more content this week, as I always would. This is more of like an extra bonus emergency episode, but that's all I have for today. Please subscribe to the podcast, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, etc. Follow the show on X/Twitter at Locked On Hawks. Follow me there at BT Rowland. Follow my Blue Sky at BT Rowland as well. And then my written work on the Hawks in non-podcast fashion is at patreon.com/BT Rowland. Everybody, enjoy the rest of your Monday, and we'll see you later on this week.